Hey, Wisnefske here, Land Legacy Group. And one of my favorite investment classes is farms and farmland. So it's a segment, I guess you could say, of rural property. But unlike, let's say, an apartment building or a duplex where you have tenants that are paying monthly for the unit, you're basically renting out acreage to be used for farming. And so it's a little bit different, a little bit, I guess, as far as the expectations for the amount of money that you're going to make on rent can be lower than if you're doing a multifamily type investment. But there are some ways to look at it to see if it does fit into your portfolio. And today, what I wanted to talk about was if basically the pros and cons of renting out vacant farmland, or if you have a farm that has the farmland and also some outbuildings and a house. There are obviously some of those properties available on the market, and I'll share at the end kind of my preferred way to look at this type of investment and what I would pick, or at least what I'm working towards picking to add to my portfolio. So the thing with vacant farmland, as far as the pros go, you're going to have lower maintenance costs because you're not having to have a house or anything like that to take care of. If you are renting it out for farming, that farmer at least should be taking care of that land because they're using it for getting yields. And so the better the yields, the better it is for them, the more money that they put in their pocket. So there's kind of a, I guess, unspoken kind of respect for the land that farmers are going to have for the land, whether it is obviously a farm or a farm, which is vacant farmland. So you as the owner will have lower maintenance costs. That in turn will take less costs as far as even property taxes, but you're not paying for the assessments on any improvements. Any repairs, stuff like that. That's not seen with a vacant farmland. If you are going to maybe put in driveways and stuff like that for better access, that could be an improvement cost. But again, it's going to be a lot less than, say, something that has a residential dwelling on it, like a full farm. I also like the vacant farmland because it really is a blank slate for you. So let's say you did want to put a house or anything like that on it. Rather than working with a footprint that already exists, you have the vacant farmland and you can lay it out how you want and put improvements where you want. Obviously that comes with costs, but you can start designing the farm that you've always wanted with that vacant farmland. The other thing is you have one tenant, so you don't have multiple tenants. You know, like with a farm, you might have a tenant for the house, some tenants for the outbuilding, and then the farmer. With vacant farmland, you're usually just going to be working with one tenant, and that's going to be the farmer that's renting the land for farming. The other thing is kind of just the lower entry costs. When you start getting into farms with improvements, those tend to carry a higher cost. And so when you start factoring in the down payment requirements, monthly payments, stuff like that, you will probably carry a higher loan balance. Obviously, you can pay cash for these things. But your overall entry costs would be less if you're just looking for vacant land. Now, some cons to this is really when you have vacant land that's being rented out for farming, that is your only source of revenue. So if that farmer decides not to pay you or has a bad year, depending on weather, stuff like that, that is your revenue that basically just went out the window. Some of the financing can be harder to get for land just because there is no principal dwelling on it, and the loan requirements might be different. You might have to have more money set aside, maybe a larger down payment. Those interest rates might be higher. So the qualifications will be different than something that has an improvement on it. If you are going to build, and this is kind of going back to the pro of having a blank slate, you do need to get approvals for that type of stuff, building permits. There's certain specifications that a property owner would have to follow when they're doing construction, even as far as maybe having limits on the size of outbuildings. A lot of these townships will have basically a minimum house square footage, which is probably right around 1,000 or 1,200 square feet. And then if you're in an agricultural area, it should be pretty lenient on the size of your outbuildings. But it's just something to take into consideration because you have to do your homework to make sure there's not something that restricts you from not being able to build on your property. So let's flip it over to existing farms. And so when I use the word farms, I'm talking about a property that has a house, it has a barn, maybe a pole building instead of a barn or both, and then it has the vacant farmland. So just like vacant farmland, there's pros and cons, and some of the pros that I wrote down for this farm is there are more income opportunities, right? You can rent out the farmland, but you can also rent out space in the barn and outbuilding, and then also the house. So what you're doing now is you're bringing in more money that is a lot more spread out over multiple tenants. So if one person doesn't pay, you have those other tenants to basically prop you up and hopefully cover any expenses that you have there. Being that there is a dwelling on the property, you should be able to look at multiple financing options for it. Banks are going to like that a lot more because there's a structure on that, and it increases the overall appeal and lessens the risk from their standpoint. Another thing for taxes, you can claim depreciation on the improvements. You can't do that with vacant land. So as far as tax breaks go, yes, your taxes might be higher as far as like property taxes because you do have those improvements. But as far as when you're doing your tax return, you can claim depreciation on parts of the improvements when you have a farm. What's also nice is everything's already established. So as far as getting like building permits to build a new house, like you already have a house on there. And if you want to update and stuff like that, usually you can just, get building permits. Some work might not even require a building permit for that. So you already are working with something that's established on the property, and maybe it just needs some new paint or some new concrete, a new roof, stuff like that. So it'd be a lot easier to get that done rather than starting from scratch and building a brand new house. One thing I do like as a kind of a second option if something ever went wrong and I needed some money really quick is you could sell off the house and buildings on a small acreage, like let's say 5 acres. So if, let's say you have an 80-acre farm, you could maybe sell off the house and 5 acres and then keep the 75 acres that's left over. That would help you put money in your pocket. That would help pay down some of the mortgage, but you'd still retain farmland that you could rent out. So I like that flexibility just in case something would ever come up where, I needed to sell something, but I still retain an asset that produces money. One of the big cons with this though, is you're gonna have higher maintenance costs. Furnaces go out, AC goes out, stuff leaks. You have tenants that are living there, they're gonna be hard on the property. Just stuff goes wrong. So now you're going to be, doing more maintenance. Along with that, you're going to have higher maintenance costs and actually just higher costs in general, because now you might be paying for electric. You might be doing upgrades to the property. Property taxes are going to be higher. Your insurance is probably going to be higher just because of those improvements, and then the overall cost of the property there. You do also have multiple tenants, so you're dealing with multiple personalities, having more leases on the property, having tenants hopefully be respectful, but some of them might wander onto parts that they're not supposed to be, property damage, stuff like that. So you're dealing with tenants, which can equal more problems for you as the property owner. And one that I think often gets overlooked is can be a higher entry cost because maybe you can find a 40-acre property that doesn't have any dwellings on it, and you're just paying for the land. But as soon as you put dwellings and outbuildings on there, now you're starting to get higher into the costs. And when you get higher in cost, that means your down payment's higher. That means your monthly payment's going to be higher because your mortgage is higher. So it's just something that you need to weigh when you're looking at this and seeing how much mortgage that property can support with the income that's coming in. So you got to be a little bit a little bit more mindful of the financing part of that and making sure you're not buying a property that's going to sink you super far down into debt, and you start putting a lot more money of your own money just to cover that mortgage payment for that investment. This is supposed to be an investment, so you don't want to be losing money on that type of thing. That's not the goal. But I promised I would share my personal preference at the end, and I do have a personal preference when it comes to this. And I've seen so many properties that I should have bought years ago, and I still kick myself for them. Yes, I look at land, but my favorite property to look at is an existing farm. The reason is I just like the pros more than the cons, and I can deal with the cons for the most part, but I do want a property that's already established. I want multiple sources of revenue. I want an option that I could split the house and buildings off with some acreage, and then also retain the remaining acreage, because I could always sell that later. And when I sell the house and the buildings, I should be able to get a higher price for that if for just that section, rather than if it was packaged up in one farm. I should be able to sell that house and buildings for a premium, and there's going to be a lot more buyers that can afford that. And they don't want a big farm. They just want, a house on 10 acres or something like that. So I would, definitely rent out the land, definitely rent out the house. I've seen farms that have duplexes on them, which would be even better. But then you could also rent out the space for storage and have some tenants that way. So when you look at that, yes, you could be managing upwards of 3 to maybe 10 tenants, depending on the storage situation. So that is a lot to take in versus, having one tenant. I mean, that seems pretty simple, right? But I just love the multiple ways to bring in money just in case one tenant would fail or I have a vacancy. I just like that a lot. I like the flexibility in possibly dividing that off and then keeping the rest. It just opens up so many more opportunities. And then for taxes, I love the ability to have that depreciation factor for that. And even though the entry might be a little bit higher barrier than vacant land, I think there's plenty of options out there for people to consider to make that work. And there's ways that you can partner with people to spread that out and to make it easier. You just got to find the right people to partner with. So I just think it's a good asset class. I think even just having, vacant land in your portfolio, whether it's just a small piece, and then you start adding to it. I think the key is just to get started and, you spread it out. Maybe you have some short-term rentals, some long-term rentals. That's like a duplex or a 4-family. And then you add a piece of land to that. You're just diversifying everything out and having different asset classes that can grow for you, hopefully. And be good returns for everything. So thanks for checking out this video. Again, my favorite asset class out of this video are those established farms. So hopefully we can do a deal together. Reach out if you want some more information about that. Email is the best, al@landlegacygroup.com. Feel free to leave a comment below and I'll reply to it. But have a great day and hope to talk to you soon.